Well, Doug, first off, Doug, old friends, known you for years. How you holding up?
We're doing good. All things considered, I can't complain. I'm lucky to be out in Connecticut with a little bit of a land and some nice sunshine, and kids that are old enough that aren't at my ankles every minute.
Christine, more of a new friend, but I wanted to talk to you both today because this is the panel of innovation. We have two people that either are or at one point were chief innovation or ran innovation for companies. And I'd love to talk about, obviously during these insane times, COVID, protests, murder hornets, whatever is going to come next. How do we find ways to innovate across media, across brands? And Doug, obviously on the agency media side for years. Christine, you've obviously on the brand side with AMI and Barnekow. So I guess I'll start off with, how do you approach innovation in whether it's a massive or even a larger company? Most companies are pretty slow to move the rudder to make changes. How have you guys basically instituted innovation in larger companies? Doug?
Yeah, I'm fortunate. Previously, in two of my prior roles, I had the title of Chief Innovation Officer, so it allowed me to create the means and mechanisms to drive change. And that's an important word, and one that actually drove me to be at 360i. Everything we do at 360i is under a simple banner of capitalize on change. And if you think about it, change is constantly around us, even before COVID. Change in the way that we deal with media, change in the way that we advertise, we have relationships with one another, with brand, with technology, with data. And so it was really important for me to be a part of an organization that didn't need a chief innovation officer, because innovation was just part of the DNA. It was part of the spirit. Our values are curiosity, courage, and can do. We talk about, 25 years ago as a company, we started from search. So curiosity, if you think about that, is really baked into a lot of what we do. And so it allows us to really tap into, I like to talk about the entrepreneurial spirit. We're not entrepreneurs like you and your brother are, in that, we've joined a company that's already established. But we have to think like we are entrepreneurials, but realize that there's ways to do that within larger organizations.
That's great. Obviously great from the media side and what you've been able to do over the years, and obviously a big fan. Christine, I'd love to hear from you. You're obviously overarchingly, but really from the brand side as well. I'm sure you've had a storied career and some great insights.
Yeah, for sure. So Doug, I would echo everything that Doug said. The thing is that behaviors are so key, and that's what Doug was talking about, because at the end of the day, innovation is all about ambiguity. And your best set plans, expect them to just blow up. No matter what you set out to do, whatever you started with, it will be different at the end of it, and for all the right reasons, right? So so to me, it's definitely about behaviors, like Doug was talking about. And then the other things that I always come back to, whether it's a massive company, right? So I used to be at Diageo, which was, a monster, and it was really tough to get things out the door. So whether you're at Diageo or you're at a company like AMI, where we have Barnekow, we have a water brand as well called Ever and Ever, and Runa, and that's a bit more of a medium-sized company, but even still, things can, be slow to move. So one of the big things that I say is that momentum is critical. So I'll talk about that, but also accountability and communication. So to me, those are like the three biggest principles of making innovation happen. And so with momentum, you have to act like every day is the last when you're doing an innovation project. And that can be really hard to do, because you're talking about timelines that, like in the liquor business, it might be 5 years out, because you have to lay down the whiskey, it actually takes time to make those things. Or in our company, a long time frame might be a year out, but every single day matters to make that day possible. So you have to treat every single day like it's going to be the last that you can make something happen. The second thing is accountability. So in terms of what I do, I work with everybody in the company, every single function. But the thing is that while my baby is innovation, for other people, they're thinking about lots of other things, right? So if they're on the finance team, they're responsible for the P&L day in and day out for the company, and I'm asking them favors essentially constantly. I have to empower people, encourage people, have the relationships with people so that they feel like they have that accountability and drive for every innovation that we're working on. And the last piece is communication. So it's, transparency is key. Innovation projects get really complex and they're constantly changing. So we've created a lot of systems and ways of communicating that make sure everyone's on the same latest page possible every single moving day. So there are lots of pieces. Behaviors is so fundamental and key, but it comes down to those three, action points too.
I think I was going to add, I think what you're saying is action is the most important distinction in innovation, right? Innovation without action is just an idea. It's just ideation. And I think a lot of times people mistake ideation for innovation. Right? Innovation is getting something done, not just having an idea. And I think, having the behaviors is important. I talk about know what you're delivering. A lot of times people might have a vision for innovation, but they don't have a framework or a roadmap or a mechanism to deliver it. Or a lot of people might have a framework or a process. We're going to go be innovative, but they don't have the vision. So you definitely need the behaviors, but then, you gotta see it through. And I think that's a lot of difference that you see out there is people don't see it through.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a great point. And I mean, Kristen, you mentioned the idea that innovation is in a world that can obviously any moment blow up. And we had a ridiculous blow up this year, obviously with the pandemic. So I'd love to, with all those nuggets of wisdom you guys have provided, how did you apply that to COVID? What was the role of innovation? Were you put on hold? Were you tasked to do things that were outside of your current scope? I guess how did COVID impact your innovation track?
Yeah, I mean, it just blew everything up, which I'm sure everybody can relate to. But I think it begs a lot of questions. I think that one of the things is, what do you innovate on? Right. So I think that one of the things that we saw immediately was that people were going back to basics with COVID. So that really that shifted some of our strategy in terms of, we've been my role is very focused on new platforms. So extending the Vita Coco brand into adjacent categories, new functions, things like that. But that while we're doing that, and that's still important for next year, we've been looking at what could seem like more tactical things, but are actually really critical things in light of COVID. So if people are stocking up more, are you thinking about simple things like multi-packs? Or if people are really going back to basics, right? Like people want Cheerios in their pantry and they want basic coconut water. So how do you lean into the very basic principle of what your product is? So there's a lot of that has shifted our strategy just overall. And then from just like a everyday perspective, I mean, it's definitely thrown a wrench. Probably the biggest thing is product tastings for me. Typically you are in a room with everybody who makes the decision, right? So, and you can all comment and be able to really see things up close. But also the big thing is that we can iterate in the moment right there in the room and have people taste it again. And now we can't do that, right? So everything gets delayed. So, and we're a company that, likes to basically run through walls. So that's probably been one of the most challenging things.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's been, obviously it was a learning experience here, but yeah, you're basically working 3 times as hard to deliver the same thing as before. I guess we all felt that during the COVID times. And Doug, I mean, we're both in the agency world, technology agency. COVID is some big stops we saw, obviously March, April. re-picking back up again, and then kind of the opposite, the boycott happened with which we'll talk a little bit later about with Facebook, and then kind of maybe a resurgence hopefully for you guys as well in Q4. But yeah, I would love to hear from your POV. What's been your biggest impact from COVID?
I get asked this question a lot, and I think that the first thing I always say is true, and I think everyone on this there's no playbook for how to operate a business in a pandemic. And so I've actually, and I bring it out all the time. I have a little sticky. My playbook is on a sticky right here, and I wrote it in the last 2 weeks of March, and it pretty much stays true. And it's 8 things you need to do. I won't read all of them, but like one of the things is a great Winston Churchill quote of "Don't let a crisis go to waste." I took the word "good" out because this is not a good crisis, nor was the time when he was talking about it. But you can't let the crisis go to waste. And I think a lot of organizations are creating new habits, and they're either being created because of, or in some cases, under the cover of COVID, which is equally great. I mean, if you think about it, another thing on the list is this notion of now's the time to speed up. Now's not the time to slow down. Now's the time to speed up. And you think about digital transformation that almost every company had to, look at. Many companies had a 5-year roadmap. And those 5-year roadmaps became a 5-month action plan. And you look at the amount of e-commerce or the amount of, I had one client that was about to launch a portable product for the summer using exclusively out-of-home and cinematic advertising in the beginning of April. And within about 48 hours, we switched the product from a portable product to an at-home product, and we switched from, out-of-home and cinema into online video and streaming video. And so you just also have to be able to move fast. I think more than anything we're seeing right now is speed matters.
And with that speed, obviously, we operate at the speed of Cisco or speed of any platform you guys might be using. I mean, what's been the best way to communicate with your teams to do this rapid innovation? And, we've replanned probably every month 10 times for our clients because something gets banned, something happens. But either of you guys, I mean, in terms of the work from home piece, how have you communicated with your teams? How have you guys stayed, in lockstep?
I mean, for me, it's been this FaceTime. So I am that person who demands that people put their FaceTime on because for me, it's just so important that we have that face-to-face conversation. You can read the emotion. It's challenging, but it's so critical. And, so much of what I do is about in-person meetings, collaboration. So it's, so by FaceTime, I mean, specifically, we've been using Microsoft Teams because that's what our company made us, use. But sometimes we'll use Zoom as well. But there's a lot of screen sharing that happens. There's a lot of, just movement, right? Like I'm sometimes in my kitchen because we're making things and we need to make things together side by side. And, it's just, you just have to be flexible and kind of be willing to bring your camera along with you. But, I definitely have not been the person who just does the voice thing all day. It's this constantly.
Sure. So, yeah. Makes sense. I mean, Doug, have you guys been doing more? I mean, there's obviously like the project workflow of this. I mean, one of the things that we've been doing a lot is every few weeks we have these company happy hours, both with clients, but also internally. Are you guys trying to find ways to stay human and not just be kind of behind a screen all day?
Yeah, actually, I mean, one of the things we've done in a couple of cities is people just getting together at a park, and of course, socially distanced and protected, but like just getting together, bringing your dogs together, just like, I feel like teams, we are missing 2 things. One is that human like connection. While screens are great, and I feel in some ways we've never been more connected to people, a lot of one-on-ones and ways to just talk to people and clients as well. But it's still not the same as sitting with somebody and having like a real, true, like face-to-face conversation. So that's been one thing we've been trying to find the right way to emulate. I think the other thing I miss tremendously is whiteboards.
Oh,
And so much so, my chief creative officer sent me a package of little whiteboards, and I don't know if anyone was it Tim Russert who used to write his little thing. So I'll be drawing on something, or I'm just surrounded by stacks of white paper, just because there's no. This isn't ideal for brainstorming. It's not bad. It's probably better than our expectations, but it's not the best. And I think nothing's better than having people in a room, putting something up on the wall, staring at it, moving it, shifting it. And I think that's what we're struggling with in a little bit.
I 100% agree. I just, these are like all my crazy notes. And totally. And like in the first months of COVID, I had this giant pad that it was like my own personal whiteboard, and I've run out of it by now. So now I just have scraps of paper constantly. And yeah, I can't wait to get back to normal. I think that there are positives of this, right? There's lots of efficiencies and ability to be in your own head when you need to be, but in innovation and these kinds of creative jobs, you need to be in person at least half of the time. I mean,
yeah. Well, the core business that we're all doing, regardless of whether it's the agency side or the brand side, it's connecting with consumers. So I guess the curiosity is probably slightly different answer for both of you, depending on your business case. But I mean, what consumer needs are emerging most in this new normal? I mean, what should we be watching? So obviously, in your side for the Barnekow water, you mentioned kind of like family packs versus kind of single serves. Or I guess for you guys, as you guys figure this out, what are you seeing trend wise you can jump into? And also on your side, Doug, what are you seeing on yours? So I'll let Christine go first and figure out what's the consumer need the most based on what you're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, it's all over the place, but I think I feel like probably one of the biggest like overarching themes is that people just really need stability right now. And it has relations to all industries, I guess, but like it's interesting because before we used to talk so much about millennials and experiences and all these things. And it's like now people are actually more so craving to invest money in things like their homes and cars, and just I mean, look at like gold and Bitcoin and everything that's happening there. It's like we're starting to ask ourselves like, what's the next safe haven for people? How do you create products that act like a safe haven for people in this really crazy world? In terms of like what impacts our world directly, obviously health and wellness is a big thing right now. People want to make sure that they're healthy and they can stand to fight things that could pop up. But also, more immediately in terms of, what our company deals with, our route to market, is that we're starting to see that things that are shelf stable in otherwise, used to be fresh categories, it's becoming more acceptable and encouraged. So for example, e-commerce is a huge driver of that, right? So it's like, before you might not have been open to ordering your milk online, but now you'd rather just, stock up and order things online that maybe previously you wouldn't have wanted to. So for us as a company where our route to market is around shelf stable products, very interesting. And all of a sudden we're realizing that there are a ton of opportunities for coconut water and beyond. So there are a ton of shifts at this like macro level, but also just in terms of how we're thinking about new product categories.
Great. Yeah, Doug, I'd love to hear. I mean, obviously, you represent at 360i, 4 or 5 different categories that are massive, whether it's grocery or otherwise. What are you seeing that's happening with consumers?
Yeah, so I'll answer this in 2 ways. One, more like esoteric, and then bring it back to a very specific thing. On an esoteric standpoint, I was a psychology major in college, and I spent a little bit too much time understanding Maslow and his hierarchy of needs. And if there's a time that pyramid comes into play, it's probably right now. If you think about the bottom of the pyramid, it's the basic needs. Yes, food, water, but all of a sudden toilet paper, paper towels, soap, what comes into that basic need really starts to be interesting. Desks, chairs, good cushions, some pens, things like that come into basic needs. Then you have what's that middle? That middle is like self-esteem, psychological, that sort of thing, where, how's your relationships? How are people doing? I think a lot of what we're trying to convey to people now, we've like moved past that basic needs stage. I think right now with campaigns and messaging, we're in this like, let's connect. How are you doing? I feel your pain, like those type of things. And the question is, will we get back to where we were before, which is this kind of self-actualization, right? And not going to where Christina is saying, like, cool programs, stunts, activations, things like that get away from how your brand typically talks to people. I think that's been an overall trajectory. Bringing it down to, I think, a day-to-day, what does that all mean? I think everyone is looking for convenience right now above all else. How convenient are you to being discovered, to getting the product, to fulfilling my needs? Convenience, I think, is the most critical thing that we're seeing a lot of our clients rally around in some capacity.
And so convenience is massive, obviously, in terms of the need state of the consumer. But isn't a lot of innovation is test and control? You mentioned it's a mixture of ideation and then obviously putting things into action. In a world where you can't, for example, I'm not sure how much the Barnekow was about sampling at grocery stores or whatever it ends up being for a product. That was a large part of the consumer experience to see if they want to try something. How do you guys get in front of people now when the touch and feel has been somewhat relatively subdued in the last 6 months?
Oh yeah, that's a really great question. So yeah, we all those live sampler moments are totally gone. So we have definitely been finding creative ways to fill that void because, of course, we want feedback on products. We also need data. So, one of the things that we've been doing that has been huge, it's been a huge unlock for us that luckily we experimented with pre-COVID, was doing sampler packs, through e-commerce. So whenever we launched a product, it was always becoming, best practice to also launch a sampler pack at the same time. So essentially give a really heavy discount to the consumer so that they will buy something that they've never tried before, they try it, and then as a part of, unlocking a coupon for even more product or a product of their choice, they give you some feedback. And so that has been really huge for us to do. The second thing too is just kind of a little bit more on the fly, but essentially through our friends and family network, we've been just sending product out and getting feedback. So just because you can't do it in the more professional, way anymore, there are still ways that you can hack it. And there's definitely no reason why you can't get that information even now. So
sure.
Yeah.
That's great. Like the word you just used is one of my favorite words, which is hack.
Yeah.
And I think like the notion of hacking, and like a lot of times people think hacking is a like software data scientist type thing. But I think as marketers right now, we need to be hacking all day, every day, and just trying things out. And, there's so many ways you could try to test. And now's the time to do it. And you just need to have a little bit of that hacker mentality, to I think get through this.
And you mentioned hacking and think of data. I think of data stacks, especially on the agency side, but obviously for any brand need to figure out how they import audiences that might be relevant during a pandemic, which is a thing now. You can go to LiveRamp, other places, and get that kind of information. Data in terms of e-com data, how that applies back to maybe even like the Instacarts. There's all these different stacks now have changed. Like things over what might have taken 3 or 5 years might be happening overnight. So I guess with you guys, how do you guys manage a data stack? How do you think about data as it relates to innovation? Is it one and the same? Is it part of kind of a separate strategy of the different team? Either one of you, I'd love to hear about your thoughts on data as it relates to your businesses.
That's a session in and of itself. Okay, so grounding it in COVID, I think one of the things that we've been really interested in is around mobility. A challenge for marketers right now is when one DMA is good, another DMA is not. when one product might be in need here, it might not be over there. And so we've been building some dashboards looking at a lot of different type of mobility information, as well as piping in CDC, test case, all the things going on around COVID. We're seeing it, on a CNN or things like that, this data, but it's readily available. And you can actually, with good data scientists, be able to, take, open market, COVID data, overlay it with consumer mobility data from a location service provider. Look at, we're lucky to have with Merkle data like, Visa and other type of transactional insights, and start to get a picture of what, people are doing in certain areas, and then allow that to, guide some of the decisions we're making. So that's one way. Another thing we've been doing is a lot of focus groups using people on the phone. So there's services out there that allow us to get really rapid indications or sentiment from consumers on different propositions. So that really helps us be of the moment. And make sure that we're really thinking about how consumers are feeling today versus how we thought they felt 6 months ago, and so that helps.
Yeah,
sure.
Just to build on that, as it relates to all things COVID, we've been really careful to look at pre-COVID and post, right? So, because we've been seeing some, segments of the beverage category, really explode or really slow down. And then when you contextualize it, you always have to contextualize and make sure that you understand whether this is a fluke or whether it's something that has been long-standing. But overall, in terms of how we use data for innovation at AMI, it's all different kinds of sources. A lot of the stuff that Doug was talking about too. I think ultimately you always want to go in with your gut, though. And we always look at data with a set of hypotheses that we're looking to prove or disprove, because then otherwise it can be really overwhelming to look at a lot of different inputs. So we use everything from IRI and spins to shopper data to looking at different ways of cutting that data through different filters. But ultimately, I can't stress enough that when you're dealing with data, you have to first come up with your hypotheses from day one so that you can navigate so much, right? So I think that that's one of the biggest things we always come back to.
Yes.
And I'm obsessed with shopper data. I think that you can get so much from it. At Diageo, I was exposed to a tool called Numerator for the first time. I don't know if you know that, Doug, but we use it also at AMI, and lots of companies use it. But it's kind of like the updated Nielsen, maybe. I don't know if that's a controversial thing to say, but it's huge because you can just understand who is the shopper of a certain product, what else are they buying, what products are sourcing from which products. You can just get so much information. So we use that a lot to inspire new ideas.
Yeah, you mentioned IRI and making perk up. We partner with IRI to actually launch a first-to-market ability to actually measure which influencer, which content, which any social post on Instagram or Facebook led to actually someone walking into a store and swiping their card and typing their phone number in to get that discount. It's called a basket purchase. It's been amazing for our clients to see, especially during COVID, when things are all over the place in terms of how to measure things, which posts and which paid media audiences are driving the most amount of purchases at the register. And all that data is coming back as a learning agenda, even if it doesn't necessarily mean that this was the best activation with these 5 influencers or these 10 million individuals. They now have a baseline of, like you mentioned, Doug, like which DMAs, what they bought in the past, what are people's trends. So, for a lot of our clients, data has been not just always like a best, pre-laid plan, but also what's my learning agenda from now into 2021. So.
I love what you just said, because I think that the biggest misstep with data is that you use it as the answer, and you should be using it as an insight tool, So I hate it when someone wants to do research to get an answer or validate something. It's like, it's not how you're supposed to use it. Use it to iterate and to learn and to move forward. So yeah, that's really well put.
100%. Well, I know we're about 8 minutes left. The next question we could spend literally half an hour on, but we'll try to. I want to get it across, and I'm sure we both have a POV on this. So when I think of innovation, I think of progress, and this country needs a lot of progress in the social justice arena. I know just Doug, because I've obviously we spoke a number of times about this with your what you've done with a number of your initiatives you can talk about. But I'd love to feel from your POV, how is social justice applied to your overall companies, but also is innovation touch this? Is that part of, how do we make ourselves better just as people as well as an organization, as a part of our kind of message out to the world?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you separate the two, be it you as a business, you as a person, or you as a brand. The obligation is on all of us to drive that progress forward, Ryan, as you said. And, there's a lot of areas where progress needs to happen, and I think two areas that we've focused on, and there's many, many other I can, again, spend time, because I'm learning a lot through this personally myself. This is probably the one area I've probably learned the most over the last 4 months. But two areas that we've really focused on is, one is external, and we believe we have an obligation around the way media platforms and media partners behave. We believe that platforms shouldn't be, propagating hate. And we believe platforms need an obligation towards diversity. And those are two stances we've been public on. They're not easy stances to have, but important stances. So that's like one area. And then within ourselves, we're not satisfied with our own diversity. We're here to help represent, the population. And if you look at us and many of our industry, we're not where we need to be. So I'm proud of, we've put some things in place. One of the things we've done is we've realized bringing talent in at the entry level is really important. And so we've created a junior academy program this year that is 100% diverse oriented. This being a year where you might cut those type of activities, we actually doubled down and made the size of the class twice the size that it normally is. Those are just some ways that we're trying to tackle it, but it's tough and an ongoing process.
Sure. Christine, I love your thoughts on how it's applied to you guys, whether your overall business or individual brands, or even your individual group.
For sure. I mean, I echo everything that Doug is saying, and I think that this has been a big learning period for everybody. I think that the big thing that I've realized is that there's a bigger call to action for these brands that have such a stage to drive these agendas forward. So there is that responsibility, and there are actions that we're taking. I think that where to start is something that's been interesting. So any company that is, pushing any product out there to consumers should be able to look at their business and stare it in the face and pretty easily see disparities, from the very get-go. So something that, I think has set us up to be able to take some actions in all the relevant spaces right now, right, is the fact that for a long time we've been looking at disparity on a few different levels. So, at Vita Coco, we source our coconuts from all over the world, right? And what we've seen is that when we worked with farmers that tend to be a lot of family farms, for example, in Southeast Asia, a lot of them don't have the opportunities or access to, certain farming tools, different initiatives that could help them optimize how they get the best yield possible from their crops. So something that we created was something called the Vita Coco Project. And the key thing there is, helping with that farmer empowerment, but also we looked around at the community and we realized that there was no education access. So something that we did was, invest heavily in education in the different communities that we're working in. I think that we've built 30 schools to date so far. But that's an example of looking at social justice as it applies to your, bread and butter as a business. But then beyond that, you have to look outside of it, right? And something that really was a wake-up call for us was when COVID happened, and we realized how many people were not getting access to school meals. If you lived in a certain community, you were really, really screwed over by what was happening on a lot of different levels. And something, that we noticed was how much we were profiting from COVID. People were going to grocery stores. They were buying a ton of coconut water. We saw our business explode. So, something that we took really seriously at that point was giving back. So we looked at our profit and we gave a slice of $1 million back to a bunch of different programs, including No Kid Hungry and Feeding America.
That's great.
But disparity doesn't stop there. But my point is, sometimes you need to start with what is most immediately affecting you as a company, because it's staring you in the face.
Hats off. It's the fact that you guys have put your money where your mouth is, and obviously doing a number of great things, and obviously both of you guys have. And we're getting near the end of the time. I'd be remiss, because whether it's social justice or whether it's marketing or whether it's branding, it's all happening now on social, which is for better or for worse. I know there's obviously certain platforms, things that need to get better at what they do, but overall, no one can deny that the attention that people are giving on their phones and on their screens for social media has ever gotten any higher. So I'd love to know on either side of you, either whether it's the brand side or the agency side, what's your guys' POV on influencer marketing, and is that a big portion now in 2021? Is it seem like you're going to go back more to TV and towards other mediums? What's your guys' POV?
Yeah, we're lucky in that we have a sizable influencer offering within 360i. It's something that we really work closely with our clients on, and we look at influencers in a multitude of ways, being it every day to build real authentic trust, to very premium influencers that allow us to drive reach and amplify key brand messages and association. I think at the end of the day, people want authenticity. They want, they want to have trust in brands, and influencers done right is really, a powerful tool. I say influencers done right because I think there are a lot of brands that are just paying to do influencers, or treating influencers like a blunt media object. And I think, using planning tools, being sophisticated in how you think about influencers, just like you think about any other marketing decision, is really important. And I don't know if a lot of people actually give it that thought.
Great.
I'm less involved with influencer, but what I will say is, from what I've seen on the sidelines, seeing the brand team in action, is that I feel like the most, it goes back to what Doug is saying. Instead of using them as this kind of, element or pawn, it's really using it for meaningful content, so where I've seen it really do well is when you get really meaningful content out of that influencer partnership. Also in terms of social media and how it relates to me and what I've seen, I think that what Vita Coco is focused on is using social media as a really good engagement tool. So we've used it to solicit ideas for new flavors for our coconut water. We recently just launched a campaign which is actually asking our community of social media followers to submit designs for a billboard. And we're essentially going to hire our next internal designer based off of those submissions. So we're really trying to come up with very engaging social media and influencer content, so that it's not just checking the box, it's actually getting people engaged.
Well, thank you both. We're up against time. Great ideas, great action, great concepts that we should all take to heart. A lot of our people that are listening need innovation to find ways to solve the problems from today. So, Doug, Christine, thank you so much for your time, and we'll be in touch.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you
all so much. Christine, thank you, especially because it was your idea to do this innovation panel. Thought it's very useful and really appreciate it. So thank you guys very much.
Thanks so much. Have a good one.
You too. All right, so keeping it moving. We have another great panel as we've had all day long. So next up is a brand you probably all recognize.